Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's we'll be comparing the Ineos Grenadier to the Ford Bronco. Before we get into this video, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to the Warner Ineos Grenadier here in West Valley, Utah for giving me some time with both of these vehicles. I'll include a link to their website in the description down below so you can check what they have currently. And by the way, this Grenadier and this Bronco are both available for sale for the time being, if you're wondering. If you have any questions, just ask for Corey. And then on a side note, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into it. Now the Ford Bronco has a few different powertrains. This particular one has the 2.7 liter V6 that goes through a 10-speed. It puts out about 330 horsepower and then 415 pound-feet of torque. Now powering the Grenadier is a turbocharged 3-liter inline-6 that goes through an 8-speed automatic transmission. It puts out 282 horsepower and then 332 pound-feet of torque. And I do want to say, this engine bay in terms of how it's displayed is a lot cleaner than the Bronco engine bay, because like you've got like all the hoses and wires and everything all over the place, whereas this, it just looks so much tidier. Before we move forward with this comparison, I do want to mention, if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. So starting with the Bronco, I picked this particular Bronco that has some aftermarket accessories because you can get a lot of accessories on the Grenadier, so I think that it makes it a little bit more comparable. So this is not the stock bumper, this is aftermarket. We've got a winch as well. You can see the light pods added to this. But regardless, the Bronco has a cool boxy front end design, whether or not you have an aftermarket front bumper. And the Ineos Grenadier, similar setup in terms of the boxiness. And notice both of them have circular lights. You gotta have some circles to break up the boxiness. But yeah, we've got this bumper, which definitely ready to take an impact off-road. Parking sensors, you can see the skid plate protection underneath. Now, despite the fact that the Grenadier, and you guys will see in a moment, has smaller tires, ground clearance isn't all that different. The Bronco would be just over 11 inches, whereas that is just under 11 inches. And so let's get into those tires. So the Bronco can have a bunch of different tire and wheel setups. What you'll see on the base Badlands, for example, would be 33s. You can get 35s on a Sasquatch. This one has 37s, which is the biggest that you'll see in a Bronco from the factory. That'd be the Bronco Raptor. This one has a little bit of a lift. I drove it a little bit to make sure it doesn't drive too different from stock. Spoiler alert, it doesn't really drive different from stock, but lots of different tire sizes on the Bronco. With the Ineos Grenadier, again, there's different tires that you can get with the Grenadier, but this has a much more, dare I say, reasonable setup. So 255, 70, 18, that's basically like a 31, maybe a 32, 30, I think it's more of like a 31. But this is the tire size that people have been using for years with off-roaders because, well, it's all that you need and nothing that you don't when it comes to tires. I mean, don't get me wrong, those look absolutely fantastic, but it is overkill with a lot of off-roading. Okay, regardless, here's your full side view with the Bronco. It's got that kind of like classic huge tire boxy SUV look. And then here's your full side view with the Grenadier. It has that kind of like G-Wagon / Defender off-roader appearance, you know, safari vehicle look. Now let's look at storage space because I think this is important for both of the vehicles. The Grenadier is actually very, very spacious when it comes to storage. You can see tons of vertical height. Again, very similar design to like the G-Wagon with the roof. So just the boxy design leaves a lot of vertical space. But yeah, there's plenty here in the back as well. And popping over to the Bronco, it is not as spacious for a couple of reasons. So first off, not as wide as the Grenadier. You can kind of see this comes up a little bit. Now the vertical space is really good, but with the Bronco, what they do is they kind of pull the roof in a little bit at the top, so it's not as wide as what you have in the Grenadier. So that, I mean, you can see it when you look at them next to each other. Definitely a little bit more space here on the Grenadier. And I think the best thing to show when it comes to the difference in terms of design is the rear ends. So you can see with the Bronco, they've kind of raised everything up. So look at the cab itself compared to the Grenadier cab. And that's what shows you the difference in terms of design philosophy with the vehicles. You can tell this is definitely targeted at overlanding, whereas that is kind of going more for looks, and then obviously just ground clearance is kind of the big thing with the Bronco. But yeah, it's so interesting to see the design differences. And in terms of overall length, I'm actually surprised to see that they're very similar. Like, I thought the Grenadier was going to be bigger than the Bronco, but they're somewhat similar in terms of the length. Now let's just compare cabin space. So here's kind of like your legroom, and also let's compare the cabin material use and build quality. I do want to mention that this one has the factory seat covers, which are really cool, especially if you're a dog lover. And then, yeah, headroom here. Let's go see the Bronco. So the Bronco seats where I would about have it. What I'm noticing is, first off, I feel like I'm closer to the top a little bit. And yeah, there's definitely, the Bronco's not bad, but it's not as spacious with the legroom compared to the Grenadier. So there is that. Now, you can get different seats in the Bronco. These are the cloth seats, but you can also get like vinyl seats that are easy to clean. And then this is the same door panel design you have on all of the Broncos in terms of the material use. Well, such a solid sound when you close it. And yeah, it is a twist. So with the Grenadier, you got this cool two-spoke design with the steering wheel, and I really like this. So I said these were thumb grips in my other review. What I mean is, when you're off-roading, you have your thumbs like this. So having perforated texture where your thumb kind of sticks to, that's a nice thing to have on an off-roader. Now, a lot of things are built into the infotainment system with this. So like the backup camera, for example, like most modern cars. But also, you guys can see with the speedometer and all of that, that's on the infotainment system. It's not on this center stack here. And then you have this really cool compass in the center that also shows you the elevation. And then tons of physical controls here, very like airplane themed. And they just have a nice actuation on all of them in terms of the feedback and everything. And then this does have a 2-speed transfer case with this one. This one's a Trial Master. You can see more physical controls here. And just, I want to mention, everything's super sturdy feeling in this interior, which I think is really important. And then when it comes to other off-road stuff, we do have a front rear locking differential. We've got an off-road mode as well. You turn off the stability control if you want. And yeah, you can see this whole stack, very, again, aviation themed. And then here's the window sticker on this one. Again, it's a Trial Master. After all options, this one originally $86,575. Now, because the Bronco has frameless windows, yeah, it doesn't have as solid of a sound. It's just a frameless window thing. It's pretty cool. So this is kind of more of a traditional steering wheel, if that makes sense. So you've got like practical controls here, cruise control, all of that. And then you got the Bronco gauge cluster. So this has an actual gauge cluster, whereas with the Grenadier, again, everything's in the center. And then you guys can see the camera. This one has the 360, which is always a nice system. Yeah, huge infotainment system, just like what you have in other Fords. And then you can see you've got dual zone climate, heated seats, heated steering wheel, which we're gonna actually turn those off. A little bit of storage there. Shifter here for the 10-speed, and then we have an advanced 4-wheel drive system. So whereas the Grenadier was 4-wheel drive all the time, this actually has 2-wheel drive. And then we've got front rear locking differentials, no center locker. Now, if you get a Badlands or a Bronco Raptor, you also have the stabilizer bar disconnect, which is a nice feature. The Grenadier doesn't have anything like that. Auxiliary switches, and then this one's a soft top, but you can also get the Bronco with a hard top as well. Now, this isn't a perfect apples to apples comparison. The best Bronco to compare to that Grenadier, I think, would be a loaded up Badlands. Even with, yeah, Badlands with the Sasquatch package, because again, the ground clearance on that Grenadier is actually really good, despite the fact that it doesn't have massive tires. And so with that, you're looking at almost $70,000 for a loaded up Badlands. It would be similarly equipped to that. Now, something important to note before we set off is going to be visibility between these two with the differences. So here's your visibility with the Bronco. You can see through at the back. I think that'll be an important, another important distinction to make. So I've said this in other videos. If you guys want to see other reviews, other comparisons with the Ineos Grenadier, let me know. The only other two that I could think of would be maybe Defender and then maybe G-Wagon, but yeah, let me know if there's anything else. And then the new Land Cruiser when that comes out, but that'll be a hard comparison to put together because I'm sure it'll be difficult to get both both the vehicles, just because the Grenadiers there's a few available, but for the most part the pre-order list was like, I think like 2 or 3 years or so. It's a while. Like they're sold out for quite some time. But again, like I said, there are some available if you're looking for one. But let's see how this Bronco performs. Like I said, even though this is lifted a little bit, it drives pretty close to stock with the Bronco. And I've also driven like 2 million, just go look at my channel. I have driven every single package on the Bronco. So I'm very familiar with the driving dynamics with the Bronco. The independent front suspension with the Bronco makes a big difference when it comes to on-road driving with the steering and everything. And we'll compare that to that solid axle you have over on the Grenadier, solid front axle. They both have solid rear axles. But yeah, good torque out of this V6. And this thing else to mention with the Bronco, you can get them with a manual. You got to go for the 2.3, but still it's something that's possible. Continuing along, and we'll get an acceleration with the Bronco. Yeah, the 2.7's, it's pretty quick. It's pretty quick. So, to sum things up here with the Bronco basically drives like a more refined Wrangler. I think that's a good way to put it. It's got, and now this one's a soft top, so not the best insulation, but with the hard top, it's a little bit more insulated than the Wrangler. The ride quality is a little bit better than a Wrangler. This turn-in is a little bit better. The acceleration's, you know, smoother than the Wrangler. A big part of that, again, is the extra power that the Bronco has. So that's, I think, a good way to look at the Bronco is it's a Jeep Wrangler, but more refined with independent front suspension. Let's go compare it to the Grenadier. Visibility here in the Grenadier over the hood, both of the mirrors, through the rest of the rear. So it's different. I wouldn't say that visibility is better or worse in either of them, but it's just different with the visibility. The windows are a little bit bigger, so it almost feels more open, but it might not necessarily actually be more open. Now, the first big difference you notice right off the bat is the steering. The steering in the Grenadier is, it allows for a lot more play. So you definitely have to do quite a bit more turning with the Grenadier compared to the Bronco. Which, the reason why they did that with the Grenadier, from what I've read, is for off-roading. Now, I will say this engine, surprisingly, even though it's down on horsepower and down on torque compared to that Bronco, it doesn't, I don't feel like I'm getting into like a substantially slower vehicle. And I think a big part of that is how they develop the power. Excuse me. So, with the Bronco, it's got good low-end torque, but it feels like it develops it a little bit higher in the RPMs compared to this. It's like right off the bat. So it's very much like a diesel almost. And so it's just like, boom, torque. Whereas the Bronco, you got to get into it a little bit. But once you're up and moving, I mean, the Bronco does have more horsepower and you do feel that difference. Now the next thing's going to be refinement. Even the Bronco with a hardtop is not as quiet as this is. This is just, I mean, it's like a luxury car in here. You do hear the engine, and it's a nice sound though. It's got this like deep rumble, but yeah, it's definitely more, I would say that this is definitely more refined, getting closer to like Defender G-Wagon in terms of the luxury side of things. And ride quality it's interesting. So I'd say that the Bronco's ride quality it's not bad, but you can tell again it's weird because the steering in this goes, you know, it's got a little bit of play in that, but the suspension's very tight, whereas in the Bronco the steering's tight but the suspension's kind of wishy-washy all over the place. So it's interesting with the difference between them. This leads us into summing things up with this comparison, Bronco versus Grenadier. Man, the Grenadier's, it's got some power, it's quick. So, oh, you can hear this has the roof rack. You can hear a little bit of whistling up there with the roof rack. Kind of expected. Whenever you do roof racks, it always adds noise. The Grenadier, I've seen some comments, you know, people talking about the, you know, price difference. Here's the deal. The Grenadier, objectively, as how it drives and the interior, how it feels like a much more solid, well-built vehicle. The Bronco, it's not bad, but it doesn't feel nearly as well built. The fit and finish, I mean, it's a Ford, okay? I've owned a bunch of Fords, like, I'm just being honest. It doesn't have the same tight fit and finish, and the drive as well. It just doesn't feel as well built. And so that's where the extra price is coming compared to the two vehicles. Because off-road capability, you look at the specs, it's actually very similar when it comes to off-road capability. It just comes down to, you know, the experience inside. This feels like a very well-built, you know, kind of like a bespoke vehicle, whereas the Bronco, it feels like just any other Ford in a way. So let me know which one you'd choose.